Connect. Hi, everyone. My name is Doriana. Welcome to my house and welcome live with L'isola Bella Stories. People, places, culture, history, architecture, photography, gardens, food, cuisine, wine, and anything is worth value to be discovered and shared in Sicily, in the south of Italy, and in Malta. Every week, we are on air with a new topic and a special guest. So here we are with episode number 4. And what's the story today? Every week we are on air. Picture it. We are in Sicily, in the heart of the Mediterranean Sea. Our story takes place in the western side of the island, Trapani area, the largest vineyard in Europe for the amount of grape planted in one same area. This area is also home of historic Sicilian wines such as the Marsala and wineries that have made the history of winemaking in Sicily. But it's also home of a new generation of forward-thinking winemakers and vignerons. Today, I'm glad we can have a talk with one of them. She is one of the top and most acclaimed wine influencers in the world. I think she is listed among the 40th top wine influencer. But most of all, she is a vigneron herself. Her family-owned uh, boutique winery, Cantine Barbera, located in Menfi. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Marilena Barbera. Hi, Marilena. Welcome to Isola Bella Stories. How are you today?
Ciao Doriana, I'm good. How are you? Thank you so much for having
I'm
me
very
today.
well. Oh, I'm very happy. I'm very happy. This is going to be a memorable experience. I'm sure because I know you. So,
Thank you.
how was your quarantine? Finally, we are out of the quarantine.
Yes,
How is your quarantine?
it was good because being a winemaker and being a grower, I spent most of my quarantine in the vineyards. That means I didn't spend my time at home. And this is great because, of course, quarantine was very hard for people who had to stay at home. We stopped at the winery. I mean, we don't have people now working at the winery because, of course, all the wines have been made and they're staying in the stainless steel tanks or in the barrels downstairs, or they have been bottled already. So we don't have a lot of work at the winery, but still there is a lot of work in the vineyards because nature never stops. And we had to continue
Jobs.
working with the vineyards, of course, during the quarantine as well.
Oh, that's great. That's great. A piece of advice for the audience. Guys, carry on with questions as Marilena is the right person. So be aware of this. Marilena, looking at your website, the first thing that jumps to the eyes is a sentence. I'm Marilena Barbera, and I'm an independent wine grower. I live and make my wines in Menfi. That's more than a welcome sentence to me. It sounds like a sort of your declaration of intent as a winemaker, isn't it?
It is a sort of being a winemaker and mostly being an independent winemaker means that you want to feel free to behave, to act as a winemaker and as an interpreter of your terroir, as an interpreter of your land, and striving to give your personal interpretation of what your land, soil, and all the other natural elements that make the terroir real. Try to give your own interpretation in a very free manner and try to promote your terroir throughout the world. This is what independence means to me.
And what's the story behind your family winery? I mean, it's not actually a new winery. You've got a story behind it. Can you briefly share the story with the audience, please?
Of
Can you
course.
hear me?
Thank you. My yes, I do. My grandfather planted the vineyards in 1920s. So this year, it's 100 years that our company is actually established. He was given the land by his father, who gave this land to him as a gift for his wedding. In ancient times, we in Sicily didn't used to give a present to newly wedded people, but our families used to give us land to establish a new family. So my great grandfather bought this land and gave it to my grandfather. He planted the vineyards in 1920s, and he actually was not a winemaker, but he was a grape grower. He would sell the grapes to Marsala, as you were saying earlier, because Menfi is one of the main places where Marsala producers sourced the grapes to make the Marsala wines. So he planted white
Oh,
grapes,
I didn't.
basically. Yes, it's one of the main regions that produces grapes that used to produce grapes for Marsala. Then, let's say, at the end of the 1960s, all the regulations changed for Marsala wine, so they sort of limited the area to source the grapes from. But in early 20s, the Marsala wines were produced with grapes grown also in the Menfi, Castelvetrano, and Mazzara del Vallo area. That is actually the place where we grow grapes. So he planted the main indigenous grape varieties, white grape varieties that were used to make Marsala, and especially Inzolia, that's very typical here in Menfi. But he also planted Catarratto and Grecanico and some Zibibbo. He actually made wine, but it was just like a family thing. He made wine for the family, for his friends, but it was not like a real business. It became a real business very late, I would say, in the mid-90s last century, when my father started to think that we could also turn like a passion into a real business. So we devoted to this change. So all the family was actually was taken into this what was my father idea. And when he passed away in 2006, then I took over, and I am now in charge with my mother, and I am winemaker for the wines that I make here at Mentina Barbera, but I am also involved in the grapes production and, of course, marketing, commercial sales, and everything else. We still are a small company and a family company.
A family company made of women, and please give my greetings to Donna Nina.
Yes, thank you so much. I will.
Can you tell us more about the terroir in Menfi and what type of wines we can expect from that specific terroir? You
Menfi
mentioned
is a coastal.
grapes that are basically from that area, Grillo, Inzolia, but then I would like to ask you something more about the grapes you are involved too. But then at this part of the story, let's try to figure out for the audience what's the terroir in that area of Sicily.
Sure. So Menfi is a coastal village. It's a small village. It's only about 12,000 people living in Menfi, and most of them are growing grapes. Menfi is one of the main places in Sicily where grapes are grown. There is a very big cooperative winery in the town of Menfi where everybody brings their grapes. So they make like a basic wine for the market. Plus, we have about 4 or 5 smaller independent producers like me. We are a coastal place. That means that my vineyards are located less than 1 mile from the ocean. This closeness, this proximity creates a very special environment and a very special terroir for growing grapes for different reasons. First of all, because the sea influence is very strong. It means that we have lower temperature than inland. So the interior part of Menfi is warmer. That means there is more ripeness, but also more over ripening of the grapes. While if you stay on the coast, you can enjoy the freshness of the sea, the fresh breeze coming from the sea, and a very big gap in temperatures between daytime and nighttime. And this is very, very important for grapes' health and for grapes' freshness. Second very important thing is the salinity. Because we live so close to the sea, we get a lot of salt to the sea. That means not only the wind brings the sea, but also the rain. And the soil is very, very rich of sea minerals. That means that the grapes can absorb those sea minerals from the soil and from the air, and the wine becomes very, very tasty, savory, I would say. So it's like, imagine you are cooking your meal and you add some salt or you add no salt at all. It's not that the flavor changes, but your perception of the flavor gets bigger because of the influence of salt to your palate. This is exactly what happens with wine. Grapes grown at the seaside that are rich in sea minerals, so sea salts, are more savory, and so the taste of wines is more perceptible, and you feel a bigger taste and a more intense and longer lasting taste.
Exactly, exactly. And you said before that you have in Zolia, you have Grillo, but the range of grapes that you have in your estate are many. And
Yes.
what's the ratio between international varieties and indigenous varieties in your vineyards?
Well, yes, the fact that this is an ancient, I would say an old established company, also means that different eras and different periods in time, several different grape varieties have been adapted to our property. So there was my grandfather's varieties, as I mentioned before, the Inzolia, the Catarratto, Grecanico, Pericone, those are the most ancient grape varieties, also ancient for Sicily because they all of them are from a Greek origin. Those grape varieties were brought to Sicily by the Greek and the Phoenician colonies that founded colonies here between the 7th and the 5th century before Christ. So it's a very ancient story and a very long story of adaptation of different grape varieties coming from Eastern Mediterranean to Western Mediterranean. When my father took over from his father, he was more modern, of course, so he wanted to innovate. And he introduced several international grape varieties, let's say, about the 80s until mid-90s. He introduced the Chardonnay, he introduced Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon, mainly. And those grape varieties still I grow, but they are not my personal focus. My personal focus in the following years was to sort of like readapt ancient biotypes. So ancient biotypes from local grape varieties, even if they are not really famous or known, such as the Lucignola, for instance, or the Frappato. Two grape varieties that are very, very ancient here, but they are not very widely planted because, of course, they are sort of like minor grape varieties, not so well known, even in Sicily. I also like to work with aromatic grapes like the Zibibo, which is very traditional and very interesting because you can make either vino passito, so like a sweet wine, a dessert wine, but you can also use Zibibo as a table grape. It's probably one of the most incredible the tastiest table grapes that exists in nature. And also you can make a dry wine with a lot of aromas and a lot of freshness. So I am focusing on
I've got
not
a
very
couple of
well-known
questions.
grapes. Yes. What is the altitude? Oh, it's
I've
a
got a couple of
seaside.
questions.
There is no
Yeah,
altitude. We are
before
at the sea level.
sea level, Alberto. Alberto is from Malta, and he is
Ciao,
one of
Alberto.
the most important importers in Malta. And he also asks the oldest vine that you have.
I am growing a vineyard that was replanted by my father in 1970, so 70. And it's a Massal selection from the most ancient vineyard that was planted by my grandfather in 1920s. That means that my Inzolia was never taken from a nursery, but indigenous clones that were always selected in Massal selection at my property. It's about 100-year-old clones. So it's a very, very typical and very particular also, very unique. I have 4 different biotypes of Inzolia that have developed throughout the years in my property. And I believe this, which we call dietro le case, that means behind the house. It means behind the house because simply it's planted behind the house. And it's the most beautiful, I would say, the most taken care of vineyard that we have. It's a very small. I only make 3,000 bottles every year from these old clones, and I am very, very happy to and very fortunate for the opportunity to take care of older clones that really are not present anywhere else.
It's the dietro le case. It's actually one of my favorite Inzolia wines, and it's interesting to see how from grapes such as Inzolia and Nero d'Avola, which have been badly used during the last decades, you came up with wines that are completely different from the rest that you find in the market.
Well, the first reason is Inzolia directly derives from the Rhoditis and Sideritis varieties that are grown in Greece, still grown in Greece. Rhoditis, for instance, is very popular. You have different clones of Rhoditis. You have the pink Rhoditis and the white Rhoditis. The white Rhoditis is sort of less known. Mostly planted is the pink Rhoditis. This grape variety was brought by the Greek colons to the area of Selinunte. Selinunte is about 4 kilometers from my estate, from my property. And the place where I grow grapes now was anciently considered as the Cora of Selinunte. Cora means the land to grow food, for growing food for one place, for one city. So the place where I grow Inzolia today is exactly the same place where 2,300 years ago, Greek colons cultivated Rhoditis, so the same, genetically the same grape variety for the city of Selinunte.
Alberto
So
has
this is
another.
incredibly.
Go ahead.
I use hand picking. I do hand picking. I am organic certified, and I also make spontaneously fermented, very low intervention wines that some call natural wines. I don't very much like the word natural wines, and that's just personal because there is a lot of misunderstanding about the word natural, but also there is a lot of misunderstanding about what kind of technology you can use or what kind of intervention you can have. So let's use a simple word, low intervention. What does it mean? It means I am organic certified in the vineyard. I only use very, very limited amounts of copper, while the total amount of copper per hectare is 4 kilos. I would use about 600 to 800 grams per hectares per year. That's it. Then I use biodynamic practices like herbal teas, algae teas, and some other what is teas? I mean, it's herbal extracts. That's it.
Yeah.
To enhance the resistance of the vineyards, to enhance their ability to survive some diseases that happen in the vineyard. I don't like to kill bacteria. I don't like to kill fungus. I like to deal with them and to work together with them. One of my wines, for instance, is called Microcosmo,
That's
microcosm.
one of my
This is
favorites.
my personal view. It's the Pericone. It's my
One of
personal
my
view.
favorites.
It is sort of like a holistic approach to viticulture, meaning that because we are all parts of the world, I mean, of our environment, we should and we must live together and try to collaborate for a better expression of our life and of our existence. And every single thing, it could be an insect, it could be a plant, it could be an herb, it could be whatever. Everything is important for the balance within the microcosm. So this is how I like to work in my vineyards. The same kind of approach I have in my winemaking. So there is only spontaneous fermentation, both for alcoholic fermentation and malolactic fermentation. All the processes are sort of like natural. I mean, it's my role is not to stand up on the wine. My role is to witness what happens and to help if my help is needed. I will never leave the wine alone. I mean, I think that somewhat is important. A winemaker is important to take care of those processes, but the winemaker should never step into those processes, putting his or her personality up front. He or she should stay just one step behind, witness what is happening and try to help if needed, and try to develop wines that are very, very much linked to their place. I will never interrupt the link between the land and the wine. There should always be a link and very distinctive connection between every wine and their vineyard and their soil. That is also why I don't make blended wine, except one that my father liked. But I like to work with single vineyards. So whatever is in this little parcel, one variety, two varieties, I don't care, but this is the vineyard that I will harvest, and all the grapes in that vineyard will become a different wine from another vineyard.
I fully understand. And in fact, there is another declaration of yours on the website that is very much into what you have just explained. You write, no tricks, no frills, just wine. And it's
Yes.
exactly what you said. I got a question for you from John. He's from South Africa. He says, I read about an acclaim and read from a beautiful vineyard you have, a 20-year lease, and that has particular grape, Alicante. Is that because you needed more space, or is the 400 meters above sea level altitude a requirement for Alicante's aroma?
No. So Alicante is a Spanish grape, which is actually Garnacha Negra. It's planted in the Penedès and in the Priorat areas. Sicily has had Spanish colonization dating back to the 16th century. Actually, the property where I work, it's called Belice, Tenuta Belicello, and this property was a part of a very, very big property owned by the Prince of Castelvetrano. His name is Diego Armando Cortés. You know Cortés. It's the nephew, I think, of the Cortés that went to America to do that, like the conqueror of the Americas. It's the nephew. And he was given this land by the King of Spain because he was the winner of the war and he conquered the Americas for the Spanish crown. So those soldiers, those people who actually fought the Americas wars, but also other wars for the Spanish Empire back in the 15th and 16th century, were given properties, not really in mainland Spain, but actually in their colonies. So they were given land in Menfi and in Castelvetrano and in Mazzara del Vallo. It was a very, very big extension of land. And they adapted Spanish grape varieties to this place. So Alicante derives from that period, from that period in time where Spanish grape varieties were adapted here. And I liked to bring those this heritage back, because we in Sicily are part of a very extraordinary, but also very complex heritage. We have the Greek, the Phoenician heritage. We have the Arab heritage. The Zibibbo, for instance, come from the Arab heritage. The same word Zibibbo, Zbib, it's an Arabic word that means dried grape. We have the Spanish colonization and thus the Spanish grape varieties. And then we have had the English influence while we developed our Marsala from the more ancient oxidized wine, then fortified with the English influence. So when I thought about Alicante and my father decided to plant it, it was like a sort of positive thinking on which is our heritage. I don't want to grow Merlot anymore. This does not belong to us. What belongs to us is the heritage we have conquered after 2,500 years of people who have worked here, who have planted here, who have adapted their varieties here, varieties that have become part of our identity.
Exactly. But you do have international grapes. I think you still have some Merlot and some Cabernet Sauvignon, right?
I do. I still grow them because I am sort of sad to kill a vineyard. This is probably the only reason. A vineyard, so it's a living thing. I don't want to destroy a living thing. As long as this living thing is healthy, it should have the right to live. I'm not the one who kills them. But of course, as soon as those vineyards are not in good health anymore, they will be replaced. And I am not going to replant them with the same grape varieties. I would really very much like to focus on the local grapes and also not just the local grapes, as I mentioned before, with the local indigenous biotypes. Because Sicily is a big island. You can find Nero d'Avola everywhere. But the conditions where Nero d'Avola grows, the conditions are very different. So you don't want to just plant one Nero d'Avola. You want to select and be very precise in selecting the type of clones that best adapt to the place you live, and probably they best adapt there because they are local there. They have been there for hundreds of years. So I would like to actually focus on those very ancient clones and those clones who have been part of terroirs for many centuries.
Exactly. And Adrian Mitzi, hi Adrian, is from Malta as well. He says, I like your way of thinking, and I can say that we all like the way Marilena thinks and the way she acts. And you were talking, Karen, she's from New York. Karen La Rosa. You are really wonderful, Marilena. I love your attitudes about the vineyards. I enjoyed visiting you years ago. You were pregnant.
No, I have between 12 and 16 wines, depending on on the harvest. And don't have time for being pregnant. I have 2 dogs. So it's sort of like compensating my not being pregnant. I make a wine that is called La Bambina. So you may like think
Wait.
La Bambina.
Wait. Don't talk about La Bambina because you
Okay.
destroyed my next question. I was going
Okay.
to ask you. You were talking about the Nero d'Avola, which is
Yes.
one of the grapes in Sicily that had a sort of very bad reputations. But the way you have declined the Nero d'Avola in different ways is actually very interesting. And the way you have declined the Nero d'Avola also includes a rosé from Nero d'Avola, which is called La Bambina, if I'm right, right?
Yes. Well, that was the conversation we were having before. So because Sicily is so big, and I live at the seaside, and my vineyards are at the sea level. Also, the specific place, the very important thing about the place is light. We all think Sicily has light. Of course, it's south. There is light. There is sunshine. There is more light than you can find in the north of Italy, sure. But living at the seaside also gives you the double of light because you have the light coming from the sun directly, and then you have the light how it is reflected from the sun. So it's sort of like an amplification of light. Living in those conditions, you need to take very good care of red grapes because they can get sunburns.
Exactly.
Sunburns mean overcooking, over ripening, sort of like marmalade wines.
Jammy.
Jammy wines. What I do is, first of all, no defoliation. No, I don't trim. My vineyards look like they are like my hair. After not going to the hairdresser for long, this is how my vineyard look like. I mean, they have a lot of foliage. We need a lot of foliage. We need to shade the grapes. So no trimming, very gentle approach to canopy management.
Yes.
I only defoliate by hand, but only the interior part of the vineyard. So literally one leaf out if it touches the berries. Otherwise, no leaf are touched. This kind of management of the vineyard also lower the temperature of in the inside, in the interior part of the canopy, and in those conditions with a shaded grape, then you can make wines that are fresher and are not cooked. Of course, the maceration should be always very short. Because of course, if you keep the skin with the juice for let's say 3, 4, 5 weeks, like it happens with Barolo, with different type of wines, then you have too much extraction that will wines will become sort of little flabby, too heavy for me. So I decided to be very gentle with my skin contact. I probably use more skin contact with white wines than I do on red wines. And from a very limited skin contact, I make my red Nero d'Avola. That's about 5, 6 days, 7 days, no more skin contact. And I make a rosato with no skin contact, so it's a direct press. It's a vin gris, not even a rosé. It's a vin gris. So the grapes are picked at night because during the day the temperatures are higher. At night, brought at the winery, let's say about 9 a.m., 10 a.m. maximum, and then immediately pressed and then fermented with no skin. So it's it's a baby. It's pink. That's why La Bambina, no? In Sicily, when a baby girl is born, then you put a pink ribbon on the door of the mother's door, on the front door in the house. So when this wine finally was finished the fermentation, the first year, 2009, I come to the winery, and the people who work with me put a pink ribbon on the tank, like, hey, we have the pink wine. So at that point I said, okay, a baby's born. Let's call La Bambina. That's the story. And it was lovely from them.
Alberto says, really, I want to try the rosé wine. Alberto, I will bring you down the rosé. I promise. Next time I'll be in Malta. Don't worry. And among the grapes that are from Sicily and that you have in the state, there is the Nerello Mascalese, and it's
yes,
explain the difference that we can feel, we can have in the wine with respect with the Nerello Mascalese that we cultivate on the bottom of Mount Etna.
So it's a different biotype, which we call Catanese. So Catanese because it's from Catania. It's been in the Menfi area forever. I mean, it's like maybe 300-400 years that we grow this Catanese, and it's also a grape that you can eat. Well, our ancestors were very bright, very clever, because they didn't want to only make wine with grapes. They also wanted to grow grapes that they could eat, because, of course, in ancient times, food was very important. That's why the Zibibo and other Inzolia, so all those grapes can also be eaten. I don't have a single vineyard of Catanese. I have some vines of Catanese that are planted within the older Pericone. And this is the traditional way, a field blend, a traditional way to plant the Pericone. So it's not much. It's about 100 vines within the vineyard. And as I explained before, I will not make a wine from Catanese, because this is the vineyard of the microcosmo, and those grapes go all together inside the Pericone wine, so the microcosmo wine.
Exactly. One of my favorite wines of yours is the Amano from Zibibo grape. And it's not a bitter wine, it's not a sweet wine, but it's a dry Zibibo. I would like to show you this color, which is incredible, and it's taken from Amano. Where is the label? Here, number 3, which is the 2015 vintage, right?
Yes, you're right.
You to explain more about the Amano and why it is called Amano, which means by hand.
Yeah, because it's made by hand. I mean, it's this is when I first planted the Zibibo, as I always try to do, I didn't get the vines from a nursery, but I planted the what we call the wild vine, and then I waited for 2 years. The wild vine put their roots inside the soil, and then I grafted the wild vines with older clones of Zibibo from Pantelleria. So I just went to Pantelleria, brought some wood, like branches here, and I had them grafted onto the wild vines. I was very interested in understanding how could people make wine when there was no electricity. So, I mean, wine was made 2,000 years ago. How could they make wine? They didn't have press. They didn't have destemming machines. They didn't have temperature control. They didn't have nothing. They didn't have electricity. So how could they make wine? So I was interested in understanding how it could be possible to make wines like that. And I wanted to make one. And I decided to make with Zibibo because it's a very ancient grape variety. And also because it's very aromatic. So I wanted to extract all those aromas in a very natural way with very little intervention. First vintage was crazy. I mean, it was incredible. I spent like 3 days destemming by hand all the grapes that I had collected earlier, put there, sit in the winery in the small baskets, and then I spent like 3 days destemming those grapes by hand, and then do like a foulage, so the punching downs with a wooden stick, and then how can I press it? So I tried to press it with a tomato machine, like this, you know, how to make tomato sauce? It didn't work. So I bought like a small wooden press operated by hand. And then finally I could make wine. But the most interesting thing was I cannot use electricity for racking. So for having the wine from one small container to the other, how can I do? So I used a tube, like this. You remember when you were younger and you wanted to pick your gasoline from your father's car to put into your motorbike? Yes, that's exactly what I did.
Exactly.
So, racking. So at some point, we had the wine, and the wine was great, gorgeous wine. And so I said, like, so this is a wine, people can make wine with no machinery. People can make wine with no electricity. That's how this wine is made. And I always make this wine like that. So no electricity, no temperature control, no machinery, only hands and tools. And that's why it's called a mano. Of course, this is the only wine I make like that. It's impossible. It's crazy. It's like 10 days of craziness. I cannot afford it to be more than that. But it's a production of less than 2,000 bottles every year. So it's okay. I can make it.
And please never stop doing that, because it's one of my favorites. And I can do a vertical tasting from the very first bottle to the last vintage. So you have to keep going, making Amano wine, please.
I can see Karen, a message is Zibibo better at altitude or sea level? No, Zibibo cannot grow on altitude, cannot. Zibibo needs the sea, needs the salt. Zibibo is typical in the island of Pantelleria. And Pantelleria is probably lower than Tunisia, or at the same level as Tunisia. So Zibibo needs sun, needs dry, needs wind, and needs a lot of light. So it's hard to grow if you live in a place where it rains a lot. It doesn't like rain. It likes the heat. Like the reason why some specific clones live better here in Menfi than other clones is those clones have a very thick skin. Thick means that they don't get sunburns because their skin is very resistant to sunburns. And the yellow grapes, I mean the white grapes, are more resistant than black grapes to the heat.
And Adrian from Malta is asking, what's the total production? I think he refers to the...
I think you can read it here. Where is it? Can you see this? Can I do? Okay, yeah, we can do. 1930 total production, 2019.
So that's a very small production.
Total. Yes.
Yeah.
That's total for the world. It's a very small vineyard. I only have 936 vines. I know, I mean, they're like 936 vines there, and they can make maximum 2,000 bottles, no more than that.
And Salvatore Martinico is attracted from your Pericone. I cannot agree anymore.
Thank you.
Salvatore is from Benanti Winery on Mount Etna. So it's very much.
Pericone is a very interesting. Pericone has a very interesting story. Of course, it's a Greek origin, long adaptation. But before being adapted, I would come later, Adrian, with that thicker skin clones. Yes, I would answer that question afterwards because it's interesting. So I was saying that so Pericone was not adapted to Sicily at first. Pericone was adapted to Calabria at first. So what came to Sicily is the crossing between the ancient Greek variety that was adapted to Calabria and a local grape from Calabria. That it's probably the Magliocco, that is a very special grape from Calabria. Then, when Greek colons moved from Calabria to south and to north, they brought those hybrid with them. And this hybrid adapted to Sicily and became Pericone. But also, the same hybrid was brought to north, to the northern colonies that Greek people had established along the coast in southern Italy. And finally, this grape reached the south of Tuscany, where another people lived, and also they adapted the same clone to their terroir, and this same clone became Sangiovese. So the interesting fact about the Pericone is that the Pericone is the father of Sangiovese, that everybody knows in the world, but nobody knows the story.
That's interesting. That's a very interesting side of the story of Pericone. Getting back to Adrian's question, would the people be more aromatic, thicker skin clones?
So the Zibibbo is from the Muscat family. Muscat family have multiple different clones, probably more than 30 different clones. We have Moscato Bianco, we have Moscato Giallo, we have very Muscat of Hamburg. I cannot remember them, but 30 minimum. All of them have a different type of skin and also different concentration of, I cannot say this in English, I will say that in Italian. Benzoprenosidi, neoprenosidi, they are special molecules that contain the flavor. The difference between Zibibbo and, for instance, Chardonnay is that if you smell a Zibibbo berry, you actually smell something. You smell a lot of flavor. If you smell a Chardonnay berry, you don't smell anything. It's like a neutral grape. So the longer the maceration, the more quantity of aromas you can extract from the grapes and from the skin. But basically, the amount of terpenes and so of the molecules, they depend on the place where your Zibibbo lives, on the type of clones that your Zibibbo is, on the type of maceration that you make. Generally, they are very perfumed. But the amount depends also on terroir, not only on the variety.
Exactly.
Late ripening.
Yes, early ripening.
No, late. We would say mid-late ripening. So we harvest generally between the first.
Marilena, we cannot hear you. Marilena?
Hello?
Hello, yes. Can you please repeat? Because we lost you for a couple of seconds.
I cannot hear you.
We lost you for
Hello?
a couple of seconds. Can you hear me?
Now I have it.
Okay.
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, now yes. Can you please, because we lost you.
Yes, I can. Sorry.
Okay.
Connection is bad. Sorry.
No problem. So you were saying
okay, perfect. We're here again.
It's a late mid ripening.
It's, yes, sort of like mid-late. So between about the second week of September. Then it depends on climate conditions and it depends on the harvest. But generally we harvest before the half of September.
Okay. And then we have
Pericona is more late.
Then we have a son is from South Africa, but he lives in Malta. And he's asking, are your wines available in Malta?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
So to all the importers join us, please connect with Marilena,
I'm available.
because we need her wines in Malta. We have something from John. I see now that Menfi is southwest on the south coast. Are there many wine farms in that area of Sicily? Or what is the most common crops?
So this is an interesting question. Menfi is a place for experiments, always. I think we grow, not we, I mean, not me, but in Menfi area, about 40 different grape varieties are grown, 40. So it's a huge diversity. That's a lot, which can be good on one side, but very bad on the other side. It's good on one side because climate conditions are so incredibly beautiful that you can grow anything here. I mean, you can grow food here. Anything grows in a very, very good way. The food is great, it's tasty, all the vegetables, the fruit, everything is really tastes very good. Menfi has a lot of fresh water also. I mean, underground water, fresh water. That means that we have a lot of water that we can irrigate our crops. So there is vegetables like tomatoes, aubergines, pepperoni, zucchini, anything you would like to eat, then we grow. This kind of richness, agricultural richness, has also led the farmers, the wine growers, to plant very, very different grape varieties, a number of. Not all of them make sense to me, probably not 40, maybe 15 makes sense to me. But you can find Chenin Blanc, you can find Viognier, you can find Sauvignon Blanc here in Menfi, from the big cooperative winery that probably produces about 40 million bottles a year, which is huge.
That's a huge production.
Huge. That's massive. That's really massive.
Yeah,
massive production. Yes.
I mean, it also means to me that there could be a lack of identity when it comes about wines and winemaking in Menfi area. I mean, such a wide range of grapes with many international grapes in a territory as in the region as Sicily with its own tradition in winemaking could be a little bit confusing.
It is. That's why I said that this is probably the other side of the coin. I mean, it's you lose identity. One funny thing, which is also a disaster, for let's say 15 years, I have been the only producer in Menfi with a DOC wine, which is nonsense.
Nonsense.
2,000
exactly.
families producing grapes, 2,000 families making grapes for the co-op, zero wine with a DOC appellation Menfi. And I am the only producer for 15 years. This is nonsense. And this is a lack of identity. And I understand, totally understand, that it is difficult to say to the market, listen, this girl, this woman, she produces a Menfi DOC wine. And people would say, like, what does it mean? People have never, ever heard of Menfi. They want Sicilia on the label. I'm not writing Sicilia on the label. It's bullshit. Sicilia is big. Sicilia is everything and Sicilia means nothing. Etna means something. Etna means I am on a volcano. This is my terroir. Menfi is exactly the same choice. I live in a place beautiful with golden beaches, blue sea, wild lilies growing on the beach, beautiful sunsets and with the sun going down inside the ocean. 500, 600 meters distance between my vineyards and the sea. This is Menfi. And I am not writing Sicily. Never in my life. I will never do that.
Exactly.
Following this very, very stubborn idea, and I am sort of like a stubborn person, I have sold to United States Menfi DOC wines 10 years ago for the first time, when nobody wanted to even think about buying some Inzolia from a place called Menfi that nobody knew about. And now I am selling probably 60% of my wines there and growing every year. So people are like, yes, I want a wine from this place because I can recognize the salinity, I can recognize the freshness, I can recognize the terroir. I have tasted this, I have learned how to love it, and I want it again. So
exactly.
it's a long process, but it's very rewarding, really. I mean that.
At the very end, it's rewarding, and it gives identity to the territory and to the wine that comes from that territory. And that's why Adrian is saying, I will visit you next time I'm in Sicily. And Karen
Yes,
from
please.
States totally agree.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you so much.
And John, well, very interesting. Hope Menfi wines become popular. Menfi DOC. And thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marilena. It has been a very interesting conversation, and you are a wonderful entertainer with lots of very focused and precise information about your wines, but about the territory of Menfi, most of all. That gives a wide understanding of the problems and of the issues of winemaking in your area. Thank you, everybody, for following us again. If you have any questions, we have a couple of minutes remaining. Otherwise, I have to say you goodbye and see you next week. No, I'm not going to see you next week because we are out of our lockdown period, and we'll stop for a week to think and to give a new shape to our show. So the new episode and date will be announced soon on Facebook and on YouTube. And if you like the show, please follow us and spread the word. Grazie, a presto. Thank you, Marilena, for being with us.
Thank you.
Everybody, see you next time. Bye.
Thank you all. Thanks for your questions. And I hope to see you at my winery as soon as it's possible again.
Sure, that's very important. I think that everybody should pay a visit to Marilena. We're in Sicily, because you will learn a lot of interesting stuff, and most of all, you can taste her wonderful wines, and you can visit an area of Sicily which is absolutely amazing. And I used to call the area the ultimate frontier in Sicily. So please welcome to Cantina Barbera as soon as you can. Thank you very much, everybody, for following us again. Bye.